getting one. I'm a rhino, I'm a hornet toad. Netherlands to Borneo. Planet Earth, we can't neglect it. Nature's sexy. We need this place, so please respect it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Wild and Unprotected. I'm your host, Ethan Leaman, and I'm here with a special guest today, Terrance Lee, the Deputy Director of the Red Panda Network. Hey, Terrance.
Hey, Ethan. Thanks for having me. This is really cool.
Yeah, excited for this one. We don't get animals like red pandas on here very often, so it's pretty cool to have something as unique as them.
Yeah, they are unique. This is really cool.
Well, let's go ahead and let's just dive in and let's get this kick started. So tell me a little bit about you and how you ended up with the Red Panda Network.
Yeah, so I went to school for biology, emphasized conservation biology. And then I've been working in the nonprofit field for a while. And I was working for the University of California and in San Francisco, and needed a part-time job and found a job with Red Panda Network. It was like an administration coordinator, and got the job and have been with the organization ever since. It's been like 12 years now, so pretty cool.
Damn, working your way up to the top. That's honestly impressive. I don't think you get to see that very often in nonprofits, just because it's so difficult working in the nonprofit space. I mean, we experience it with how difficult it is to keep going, based off of donations, grants, things like that. So it's pretty impressive that you've been able to build not only a 12-year career, but continue to work your way up to the position where you're at now.
Yeah, the nonprofit field can definitely be challenging, but yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. So let's talk about why you got into Red Panda Network and how that started, outside of needing a job, schooling, things like that. I believe you told me that you had an encounter story that kind of led to this moment in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's funny because my first experience with the Red Panda was about 10 years before I got the job. I was probably about 17, 18, and I was at the San Diego Zoo. And I, from a distance, saw a sign that said, Red Panda for the Red Panda enclosure. And I was like, that's not a real animal. Like, I'd never heard of a red panda. And when I walked over in the enclosure, the panda was on its hind legs, kind of doing that sort of waddle that they do when they're annoyed or if they feel threatened or whatever. Yeah, exactly. That's adorable, but usually it means that they're trying to scare something away. And because I had never even heard of one, to me it looked like a toddler in a like a onesie, Red Panda onesie costume. And I was perplexed for a little while, and then realized that was an actual species. And then randomly, coincidentally, 10 years later, I'm working for an organization that's saving them. So it's kind of cool.
It's amazing how that happens. I think, as we get older, we start to look back in life and see, oh, wow, there was some type of interaction that had happened that took me down the path that I am now. And in your case, mistaking red pandas for children in onesies led to, a deputy director position and probably one of the cooler conservation efforts that I personally have ever seen. So let's talk about the Red Panda Network a little bit and what you guys do.
Yeah. So we have been conserving red pandas since 2007. So we've been at it for a while. We use a community-based conservation approach. So all of our programs are, built on ideas that support local people and engage them in being involved in the programs. Conservation can sometimes be divided into top-down approaches and bottom up approaches, and ours is definitely bottom up approaches. So we collaborate with the local people on these conservation programs. So one of our signature initiatives is the Forest Guardian program, and that's where we actually hire local people to monitor and protect red panda habitat, and then they also educate local people in their communities about red panda conservation. So
now let's talk about those local communities. Where exactly are red pandas found? I mean, I know Red Panda Network is a U.S. based organization, and there's no red pandas here in the States. So where exactly are those local communities at?
Yeah, so red pandas are a Himalayan species. Their range countries are Nepal, which is where we primarily work. We're starting to work in Bhutan. And then red pandas are also found in Myanmar, / Burma, China, and India. So those are the range countries. So, they're high altitude species. The places they live are very rural. The local people are, pretty isolated from like any major cities, any major, development areas. So they often end up being pretty, what we call forest dependent. So, it's not like they can, like we do, just, we need something, we go down to the grocery store and we, buy it, or, order on Amazon or something. Like, that's not really an option for a lot of these people. There's not even internet in a lot of, the places that we work in. So these people, they have to basically, use forest resources to sustain their lives.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I'm assuming that's kind of where the Forest Guardian, program was born, was having an understanding that, these people need the forest. They rely on the forest because they live in such rural areas. And in turn, it helps save, these red pandas. So let's talk a little bit more about that program. How did that come about? What impact does it have? And how do you guys facilitate that?
Yeah. So, I mean, like a lot of our staff, the Forest Guardian program is one of my favorites. And basically it started with, I can't remember the exact number, but it was less than 10 Forest Guardians back when we started Red Panda Network. And it's since grown to over 120 Forest Guardians in Nepal. So it's a very successful program. And one of the coolest stories that have come out of it is a film called The Firefox Guardian. And that's it's like a 12-minute film by Gunjan Menon. And it's basically the story of our first female Forest Guardian, Manuka Batari. And she, overcame all these obstacles to become a Forest Guardian. As a woman in very rural Nepal, there's a lot of gender inequalities. There's a lot of challenges that women face in order to, not only pursue their dreams and goals, but basically to have any sort of, financial independence, financial freedom, to, be able to be sustaining and self-reliant. And so for a woman like Manuka to not only do that, but to become, a trailblazing conservationist, helping us save red pandas, was just an incredible achievement. And this film shares her story, so I couldn't recommend it enough. And I've seen it like 10 times and it still brings me to tears. But yeah, I mean, and really what I love about the Forest Guardian program is it really helps us, feature these local people who, a lot of times when I talk about the work we do, I feel like I'm talking about people as much as pandas, which is interesting because I love talking about red pandas. I mean, like all of us, I love animals. I love talking about, their unique qualities, what they've evolved into, why they have these adaptations, what makes them so special. But these local people who, a lot of them are living, in marginalized conditions. Poverty is pretty severe in a lot of these rural areas where red pandas are located, and just their a lot of their just perseverance and dedication to living more sustainably, more harmoniously with the local environment, and also being involved in our conservation work. I just find it really inspiring. And we could not, as a community-based conservation group, we could not do any of the work we do without these local people. So that's why I really try to, tell their story. And the Forest Guardian program has, been one of the most successful programs we've done. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been super impactful. And I want to actually dip into the community-based conservation approach, because that's something, here at Wildscape we really care about is, getting the community involved. Because a lot of times, most communities, they'll see an organization and they'll only see it as an organization. They'll be like, they'll pass it off as, oh, it's just the people trying to save turtles, or that's just the people studying whales, or in this case, red pandas. And they never really get involved. But the moment that they get to be involved, they automatically, I've seen, increased participation, almost 10 times, because they get to know the people behind the organization. And I think that's something that's really important. So tell me a little bit about the community-based approach that you guys at Red Panda Network have, and how you facilitate that, being across the seas and things like that.
Yeah, so I think, in conservation, we found that, and this should be pretty obvious, like you can't go into a place and expect people to do what you say in order to like save the species, like that is, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when they're dealing with poverty and lack of resources, lack of employment opportunities, all these challenges that happen when you're living in these areas. So instead you kind of have to have you have to build relationships with them. You have to understand what their needs are, what their difficulties are, work with them to find solutions that allow them to feed themselves, feed their families, live more healthy. Like for example, a lot of the people in these areas, they cook with basically like open fire pits in their homes, like that. That's just what they have access to. And so you can imagine the problems that causes. I mean, anywhere from just having to use a lot of firewood, all the way to pretty substantial health issues.
Mm-hmm.
Smoke inhalation. I mean, it's a world problem, where people have all these problems with breathing and asthma and just all these health conditions that are caused by breathing in indoor smoke every day, basically. And so we work with these local people to install improved cook stoves. These are metal stoves. They're very efficient. They have chimneys, so the smoke doesn't get released into the homes. And they also use 50% less firewood. So when people are cooking and heating their homes, again, these are the Himalayas, so it gets cold. It gets very cold, especially at night and in the early morning. So they need to be able to warm their homes, and these stoves are just much more efficient. So like that's one of the programs that we have where people, get access to these improved technologies that allow them to more easily preserve the local forest, and also just creates incentives to conserve the species that's red pandas living in around them in the local environment is much more beneficial to them, to these communities, than them being poached or their habitat being
Mm-hmm.
deforested in the long term. And that's something that we obviously have to communicate and work with local people to understand. But real quick, more anecdotal, our executive director, Ongpuri Sherpa, he has a saying that I just love to, share, which is, conservation cannot happen on an empty stomach. And I just think that's a really important way to think about the work we do. We can't expect people to make these changes if they can't feed themselves. That's just not, it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. So that's just something I usually keep in mind when I'm doing my work.
Yeah, and I think that is something that's impactful beyond, particular species conservation. I mean, you think about everything, that we as nonprofits try to do here in the States. No one's going to care about working for a nonprofit if they can't put a roof over their head, or they can't, have a sustainable, living situation. And that's really impactful. And once you're able to kind of move past that, okay, I'm taken care of, you can start to look at others. That's a big problem that I'll be, completely transparent about, here at Wildscape. It's expensive to do the stuff that we do, to create content, to create, education-based material that people should consume in an engaging way, and it's not cheap. And we have volunteers, and we have people who really step up and dedicate their time to really be able to do this. But at the end of the day, they have to take care of themselves, and that's true across the board for all conservations. Once they're taken care of, their mind seems to open up a lot more because they're not so worried about themselves. And so I think that is what you guys are doing there, taking that community-based approach, taking a people conservation stance just as much as the animal themselves. I think is really important and something that is overlooked in conservation a lot of today. And like before we started recording, when we had this discussion, I think it is so impactful, and it really differentiates Red Panda Network from a lot of the conservations that we work with. And I applaud you guys for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So I think another topic that kind of just got brought up, we don't have it in our episode guide here, but I think it's interesting, is the impacts of the community on red pandas and what they face. So it seems like the two major issues that red panda that's the first for me. Might keep that one in there. It seems like two major issues that red pandas face are deforestation and poaching. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So habitat loss is the primary threat to red pandas, by miles. But poaching is also a problem, and basically the reason why poaching is a concern is because there may be as few as 2,500 red pandas remaining in the wild. Like, one of the things that Red Panda Network is doing is we're trying to understand how many red pandas there actually are in the wild, but the low estimates are 2,500. So and in Nepal there's estimates are less than 500 red pandas in the country. So when a red panda is poached, especially as a solitary animal, where only a certain number of red pandas are going to live in an area, because each solitary animal has its own range, it really affects the population. So basically, these animals are already vulnerable. Their population is already vulnerable, and poaching basically exacerbates that. We do prioritize anti-poaching. We have 12 anti-poaching networks in Nepal. Forest guardians are an important part of that. Our anti-poaching networks are made up of forest guardians and other stakeholders, all local people. They work with enforcement agencies in they report poachers, they dismantle traps, they do all these important things. But also what we do is we educate local communities, because one of the interesting things about red panda poaching is we found, Traffic found that it's largely fueled by misinformation. So red pandas are not really worth anything on the black market, is what this study by Traffic revealed. So basically, local people in Nepal are misinformed that they are worth something, and so
that's why they get poached.
Yeah, exactly. And again, because
to me, they just, it doesn't seem like they have much value. I mean, I don't think if you use their fur potentially for something, I don't really see much value in poaching red pandas. It's not like poaching elephants, where their tusks and the ivory in their tusks has immense value. I don't see that in red pandas, unless I'm completely missing something, which feel free to keep me honest.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, basically, the pelts and the tails are seen as potentially having value.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to, inform people, educate them that red pandas aren't really worth much on the illegal market, basically.
Mhm.
And it's really not worth the risk because it is illegal to poach them, and poachers are arrested. They go to jail, they're fined. So yeah. So and obviously, again, that's where sustainable livelihoods is obviously an important solution to stopping poaching, because nobody there wants to poach. Like, again, I just mentioned the risks. So a lot of it comes out of desperation, people needing a way to feed themselves and to create income. So when we are able to offer these sustainable livelihood programs, alternative income, sustainable income programs, like being a forest guardian, that's an example, like being on these anti-poaching networks, the many other programs that we have, those are obviously much more sustainable options for these local people other than poaching. And actually, we've even hired former poachers to join our team, which is obviously really cool.
Yeah, I mean that just seems like the impact on the Forest Guardian program is huge to the local communities, and being able to flip kind of how people view things, especially from a poacher to a forest guardian, that's incredible.
Yeah, the name of the program that we're in the process of creating a name for this program, which is Poachers to Protectors. Basically, that's our initiative to redirect people who are susceptible to poaching to something much more rewarding and sustainable, like being a forest guardian, for example.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to see what you guys do with that program and the continual impact of how many people do flip sides from that poacher to protector once they're informed. Terrance, I think a really good place for us to start back up is diving into the marginalized communities portion of the discussion. We had hinted on it earlier in the show, but I think it's really important to kind of hit that again.
Yeah, I mean, marginalization and poverty are a very big obstacle for conserving red pandas and a lot of species in a lot of places. So one of our priorities over the years has become basically supporting and empowering local women. I mentioned earlier that women face a lot of inequalities and injustices that really limit their lives, and women are very important to red panda conservation. I mean, so we in 2018 we started basically our economic empowerment program for women. We also call it financial freedom for women, economic independence, just basically creating programs and opportunities for women to build skills, expand their capacity, be educated, all these opportunities that they often don't get, again, because of these inequalities in rural Nepal. And and that also includes our forest guardian program, and just opportunities to live sustainably, independent, and also be involved in conservation. That is very important to our efforts to reduce poverty, poverty alleviation.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought about, in between our conversations was cultural differences and how that could impact your efforts. Have you seen any pushback, especially at first when this program first started, due to cultural differences from where they are now and where we are in Western society?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question, because in that film, The Firefox Guardian, even just in that 12-minute film, Manuka, the main person in that story, she talks about that, and how when she first became a forest guardian, people were like, some of the local men were like, "What are you doing? Like, women aren't supposed to be out here in the forest doing this kind of work." And she got a lot of judgment for it. And then things are starting to change. I mean, people, more women are getting involved.
Mhm.
People are just becoming more just accepting and understanding and supportive of this kind of work, because they're seeing results as part of it.
Yeah.
For example, one of the most impactful programs that we have is ecotourism. So, for example, we have these what we call eco trips, and it's where people are able to come out, see the work we do, experience the local communities, local culture, and of course see red pandas in the wild, and all the amazing Himalayan wildlife. But the reason why it's such a effective program is because, anytime someone comes out there, they're using local homestays, they're eating local food, they're using local transportation. The funds that we receive for these eco trips, they go back to the community, and so it's creating this sort of infrastructure where people are just really seeing how conservation can lift people out of poverty. And as soon as you see that relationship, I think that changes everything. And that's where you really start to see exponential progress for conservation.
I love this so much. It's so different. Like most other organizations, especially that we work with, are, they'll take in their funds, whether it's grant funds, donations, and they'll use it to study the creatures or species that they're working on conserving. And there's little to no community impact on top of that. It's really cool to see, the leverage of tourism. That's something that is almost, debated on the other side, like against, like encouraging tourism is a bad thing for most other organizations. And I think it's really cool to see that there's a flip side to this where there is a positive, and, you're using it to lift communities out of poverty, to empower, somewhat, marginalized individuals, and put them in situations to succeed, and to show that there is a pathway forward, outside of cultural normities, which it was so cool. It's so unique, and I definitely can't give you guys enough praise for that.
Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, I wonder if part of the challenge some organizations you've met with have is that they're focused on marine species. I'd imagine that could create a different sort of challenge with working with local people and local stakeholders. Obviously, with red pandas, people live right near where they live, and there's obviously a clear relationship between human activity and its effects on red panda habitat. So I'd imagine just with a more marine species, it'd be sort of a different set of challenges.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty spot on. And I think there's two observations I have there. One, most people connect with the species when they can see it. And marine animals are so difficult to work with. I tell this story all the time. It's something that's super impactful. Is my favorite animal on the planet are whale sharks. Like that is, to me, that's my number one. And when I actually started Wildscape, our very first time filming, we went out to Hawaii to work with my favorite organization on the planet, Hawaii Uncharted Research Collective. I love you, Maria. You're amazing. And we went out there for 5 days, and we did not see one whale shark the entire time. And before we got there, Maria was like, "Oh my gosh, we saw 3 the other day." And one of the captains of one of the boats that we were on was like, "Yeah, I had one, behind my trolling motor the other day, just kind of following me, cruising. We did not see one." And it creates a problem. You can't connect. You connect when you're able to, interact and see with your own eyes, the impact of what is happening.
Definitely.
So I think that's a piece of it. It's just not readily available. And then
Yeah.
I think you're 100% right. A lot of the organizations that we do work with are marine based, but they're marine based in places that are popular tourist destinations already. So
Yep.
there is sound pollution, there's issues with that. So it's
Mhm.
really cool to see that there are organizations that don't face those same problems, that are able to leverage what's most important, and that's getting the community involved, allowing people to see the animals. So that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when a forest is clear cut, like we see it, right? It's obvious. But when
Mhm.
you know a coral reef is decimated, or if local fisheries are decimated, it's harder to see that loss. So because it's in the ocean,
Yeah.
and we're not in the ocean. So.
Yeah. And this is just completely off topic, but something that just came to my mind that I felt would be interesting for this portion of the conversation, especially talking about women in conservation and tying that to red pandas. Has the Red Panda Network really seen an uptick in interest about red pandas, and specifically with women, after Pixar or Disney came out with the Red Panda movie?
Turning Red.
Yes.
Yeah, we were actually fortunate enough to work with Disney on not on the film, but Disney awarded us a grant as part of their release of the film, which was incredible. But yeah, I mean, Turning Red, obviously, I mean, red pandas were already growing in popularity, but that film definitely increased the love and interest in that species. Yeah, I think it's been largely positive for red pandas, because I think part of the challenge obviously is, as any species grows, especially a smaller, cuddly, cute animal, a lot of what people might think about is, oh wow, that would be a really cute pet. I mean, it doesn't take much of imagination to think about a raccoon or whatever sort of medium-sized cuddly animal as a pet. So what we try to do is we really try to counter that sort of those sort of thoughts, and just to let people know that they don't make good pets. First of all, it's illegal to have a red panda as a pet, and also they are a wild animal that may look cuddly, and they have a really calm demeanor most of the time, but they are actually a carnivore. I mean, like, they are built to built like a typical carnivore, even though they mostly eat bamboo. But they have very sharp teeth. They have big claws. They may not seem ferocious, and they usually aren't, but I would not recommend them as a pet. And also, obviously, having a red panda pet, harms their population further in the wild. So, but to answer your question, yeah, I think the release of Turning Red definitely helped increase engagement in red panda red pandas in general, and also their conservation.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how, mainstream media of that size can have that level of impact. I know the Zootopia movie did kind of the same thing for sloths. And at Wildscape, we have another show called Beyond the Clinic, which is hosted by Andres. He's a sloth vet for the Toucan Rescue Ranch down in Costa Rica. And in the first episode of his show, we talked about how they face the same issues, where people think sloths are just these cuddly creatures, and really they are not at all. And it's not advised to have them as a pet, interact with them on that kind of level, because they can harm you. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a wild animal. Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense. There are plenty of domesticated pets out there that are super cuddly, super enjoyable. Go enjoy them. Don't mess around with the sloth.
I mean,
and definitely
dogs
don't
are
mess
great.
around with the red panda.
Cats are cool too. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah. I was down in Costa Rica at a rescue center that had sloths, and I mean, it was very clear that they're very lethargic seeming, but if they have to move quickly, and they do have those big claws, that allow them to climb and live in the canopy. Yeah, red pandas are similar. They, and it's interesting. They are, physically, their ancestors are carnivores, and so they, it's like having like a small predator in your house, like I guess like a cat, but wild, So
Yep. Yep. Well, I think this is a good time to transition to our favorite segment of the show, the Wild Stories segment. For those who haven't listened to the show, this is where we really let our conservation partners, tell the real, raw, wild stories of what goes on in conservation with no red tape. We allow them to tell it how it is. We want to encourage the next generation to know exactly what life is like in conservation. And sometimes those stories can be incredibly funny. Sometimes those stories are scary. Sometimes those stories are, more calm. But the most important part is that it's real. So Terrance, what do we have for the Wild Story segment?
Well, I was debating on which story to tell, but I think I'm gonna go with the more uplifting story, which is
Okay.
the first time I got to see a red panda in the wild. So I was on one of our eco trips in Nepal. This was back in I don't know, it was like 5 years ago or something. I can't remember years very well. But yeah, we were up in the Himalayas, and one of the forest guardians that we were trekking with had reported that a red panda was spotted nearby. And everyone was really, really excited, obviously. And, obviously it's a long trip to get over to Nepal, and specifically into the Himalayan region. I mean, it's obviously a very long flight. Once you get into Kathmandu, getting to rural Nepal, it's a lot of, riding in jeeps. You're going up into the mountains, high elevation. And when you're finally, by the time you get to see this panda, it's a long journey. And so, but you have all this like excitement built up, it's sort of suspenseful. And then when you see it, you're like, it's even more incredible than you had built it up, because like, I don't know, just the way that it's just, I don't know if you noticed, but every photo of a red panda in the wild, it's always the red panda looking down from a tree, down at the photographer. It makes sense. They're arboreal species. They're usually looking at a person with curiosity. They're usually like, what is that? What are they doing around here? They don't see a lot of anything unusual like that, so they're probably pretty interested. But it was this like they estimated around a 10-month-old red panda. Really cute, obviously. I mean, people cry. I'm not going to comment or not whether I cried. I totally cried. No, I teared up, definitely. But yeah, it's a very spiritual experience. I mean, obviously you're like in the Himalayas, behind the red panda is like Mount Everest or part of that mountain range. And you're seeing this like very mysterious, very elusive animal that only a handful of people in the world have seen in the wild. I mean, so, and yes, this is a plug for our eco trips, partially, but
go ahead.
Yeah, so if you want to have that experience, join one of our eco trips. Couldn't recommend it enough. But yeah, we have like video of people seeing a red panda for first time. People are crying. People are having this very spiritual experience, and there's really nothing like it. And yeah, and for the rest of the day, we were just like in the best mood, and it was really cool. So that's my wild story.
I can imagine. How rewarding did it feel to be able to, see it for the first time after all the work, that you had done leading up to that moment?
I was definitely kind of almost in shock, because yeah, it was like I was pretty, at loss for words, and just having, yeah, like you said, just having been with the organization for a while and seeing so many photographs and videos of red pandas, obviously seeing them in zoos, but knowing that this is what I've been working to save, it was beautiful. Yeah, it was very life-changing. Yeah.
That is amazing, and love to hear it. And I'm definitely hoping, that more people get to experience those moments, because like we said earlier in the show, that connection, inspires that change, inspires, that drive to work in conservation, to want to work with different organizations or donate to different organizations, however you can get involved. But that connection is key. And this story just really shows, how important it is, even when you're already there.
Yeah. And I mean, we were talking about ecotourism earlier, and like, obviously in order for ecotourism to work, it has to be done sustainably. It has to be managed in a way that, makes minimal, a minimal impact on the local environment. So, we have like a whole policy, a whole, guidelines to make sure that we only visit red panda a certain time of the year, only so many trips during those certain times of year, because we want to create this opportunity, like you said, for people to connect with these animals on a whole new level. But obviously, it's very important for this not to be, for tourism not to become, unmanageable and to have an adverse effect on the local species.
Yeah.
That's something we really prioritize.
Well, I think that is actually a great transition for us to hit our closing segment of the show. We're about done. So how do people get involved or support the Red Panda Network?
So just checking out our website obviously is a great place to start. redpandanetwork.org. And, we're very active obviously on social media. We try to share as many stories of our conservation work, which includes the local people. We're actually right now doing a Run for Red Pandas event. It started on Earth Day, but it's going till May 22nd, so there's still a few weeks left. Where basically you register, and you any workout you do, any running, biking, hiking, or any sort of self-care can help you raise funds to support our mission. So that's definitely an easy way and a healthy way to support our work. And then actually we were just talking about how International Red Panda Day it's not very far away, so it's actually in September. That's obviously a huge day for red panda conservation. Zoos and businesses and institutions and people all over the world celebrate this day. And so if you like zoos and if you live near one, check to see if they have if they're planning on hosting an International Red Panda Day event. And there's a lot of ways to get involved. Please come check us out. You can obviously reach out to me, Terrance at redpandanetwork.org, or info@redpandanetwork.org. It's another way to contact us.
Yeah, well, awesome. I hope we get a flood of people over to you. And I know in September I will definitely have to be at the San Diego Zoo. That is quote unquote my local zoo, to go check out the red pandas. I live about 30 minutes away from that zoo, so it's not too far from me, and I really enjoy going there and being able to meet all the people who spend their time there. And as for the Red Panda Network website, I would encourage everyone to check it out, because I took a sneak peek after our first call, Terrance, and there is some pretty sweet merch on there actually. So I would encourage people to head that way too and pick up some stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan.
All right, I think that wraps it for the show. Thank you so much, Terrance, for joining us for this episode. It was a fun one.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. Yeah, it's been my pleasure. It's been great being here. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks again, Terrance. And thanks for everyone listening.